What a weekend for Penn State football recruiting as everything went the Nittany Lions' way, and the future for wide receiver couldn't be any brighter.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football and Penn State football recruiting. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. Big recruiting weekend for Penn State, not only picking up commitments, but getting some prior commits to end their recruitment. So a lot went well for Penn State. We're going to talk about all of it. Kemon Spell and Mickens bringing good news to Penn State, as well as Khalil Taylor. Khalil Taylor, the newest five-star potential wide receiver to join Penn State. Now, it's for the class of 2027. It is a little bit out there, so let's break it all down. I think starting with wide receiver is important here because Penn State's wide receiver situation has been abysmal. It's been rough these past few seasons. So this is a massive step in the right direction because of the struggles that they've had at wide receiver. And I know it's in the future. Well, is he going to stay committed? Is he going to flip away from Penn State? Of course, that's a possibility. But I think to get somebody as a face of your class of 2027, I've always talked about how important that is, where you get an elite player to be the foundation of your class, to get them sooner rather than later, because then it starts this domino effect where, hey, I want to play alongside him as a teammate. I want to throw passes to him. So whatever that is the case. Offensive lineman in the case of Kevin Brown for 2026, talking about Mickens here and how he shut down his recruitment, but just these top players that anchor these classes. Khalil Taylor, along with Kemon Spell and Leighton Van Brandt, who are now all committed in the class of 2027. Penn State couldn't be off to a better start. What makes Khalil Taylor so special is he's already touted as one of the best wide receivers in the country. He is the second overall ranked player according to On3 and 24/7. Rivals has him as a top 5 player in Pennsylvania. But if you look at the industry ranking, he is the #2 overall prospect in the state. So it goes back to the fundamentals of Penn State's recruiting. Dominate the state. The best in Pennsylvania, stay in Pennsylvania. And Khalil Taylor is doing just that. I know this is a 2027 prospect, so we're really projecting in the future here. 5'11", 180 pounds, commits to Penn State on Saturday, and he has 5-star potential. This is your do-everything receiver, very good athleticism, great ball carrier vision. I know he's a wide receiver, but just being able to see the field and adjust in real time. I think speed is ultimately going to be a difference maker here for Khalil Taylor. That's what certainly jumps off of the tape. If you watch his highlights from high school, he is just the fastest player out there. If I do have to give a little bit of a criticism, he necessarily doesn't play the best competition in Pittsburgh. He's from the Pittsburgh area, so that's another win there, is that Penn State gets a player out of the western part of Pennsylvania once again, and the Pittsburgh area is just locked down for Penn State. It continues to be a pipeline for Penn State. So that's a huge recruiting win. Like I said, Taylor has all the potential in the world. He could potentially end up being a 5-star, the industry ranking. This is a combination of everybody that's ranked him thus far. On3, 24/7, and Rivals say that he is the 32nd best overall player in the country. So that means that at the end of the day, you are a 5-star. If you're in the top 32 nationally, you are a 5-star. Granted, these are early rankings, but I hope people are understanding my point. Top 5 wide receiver in the country, #2 overall prospect in Pennsylvania, behind running back Kemon Spell, who, is already committed to Penn State. But Taylor is massive because, when your situation has been dire at wide receiver for the past couple of seasons, and Taylor selects Penn State this early in the process, that says, okay, hey, Marcus Hagans is maybe the right guy for the wide receivers coach. I've said that all along, that Hagans just needs time. Just give him time. He can recruit. And now that he's finally settled in, he's been at Virginia for the longest time. He's starting to settle in really at Penn State. To get Taylor doesn't happen by accident. Terry Smith involved in this recruitment as well, being a Pittsburgh guy, right? A Pittsburgh native. He just understands the western side of Pennsylvania. But Khalil Taylor, to go along with Kemon Spell, give you the faces of this class of 2027 will create that domino effect. Eventually, it will be a quarterback. Maybe it'll be other fellow skilled position players that are just, I want to be teammates with Taylor. I want to be teammates with Spell. They'll do the recruiting for you and do some of the heavy lifting that the coaches and the recruiting coordinators don't necessarily have to do as much now. So it's starting to change the trend at wide receiver. I like what they have in the class of 2026 with a guy like Jasir Rogers. Now Khalil Taylor is another prospect like that. Really, Rogers is being absolutely underrated there in the class of 2026. I'll talk about that more 2026, 2027 in the upcoming segment there. Then let's talk about this other recruiting win. You could call two of them, but in the case of it being both running backs, Messiah Mickens and Kemon Spell respectively, they both shut down their recruitments. They are all locked into Penn State. Stan Drayton comes in right away and makes his pitch. He has to re-recruit Mickens to stay at Penn State and just build relationships with these guys. He didn't recruit them originally, but he says, hey, I'm going to be your running backs coach. And now Mickens and Spell are so bought in that with how far it is till signing day for each of them, class of 2026, 27, these guys won't sign until December of 25 and 26 respectively. And they're shutting down their recruitments now. They're not taking any more official visits now. They know this far in advance here at the beginning of April. For Stan Drayton to come in right away and do that, a late addition to the coaching staff because J1 Sider goes over to Notre Dame. And oh yeah, J1 Sider was not going to not put up a fight. He was absolutely going to put up a fight here from Messiah Mickens and Kemon Spell, and Stan Drayton fends off Sider and Notre Dame, who were working hard to try to flip them in the process, so much so that they shut down their recruitment. So now that you know that you're getting Messiah Mickens in the class of 2026 as one of your top prospects, conservatively speaking. Now, I think Mickens is being underrated here as a running back prospect, according to the industry. That's everybody on 24/7, Rivals, ESPN. They say that he's the number 14 running back overall. I think he's top 10. I think he's a top 10 running back in the nation. Messiah Mickens was ranked as one of the highest prospects when the rankings originally had come out. He's fallen down the rankings a little bit. He was a top 40 player, according to 24/7 Sports in the nation. Top 40 overall. I think Mickens can return to that status and may I remind people, for those who actually don't know, he plays both sides of the football. So what that tells me about Mickens is he's just a complete football player. He was one of the leading defenders in Harrisburg's defense a season ago while taking a full set of reps at running back too. So Mickens has high football IQ, understands both sides of the football, and that just goes a long way, period. Now, he projects as a running back, don't get me wrong, just trying to give a little more credit to what Mickens is as a football player. And then Kemon Spell. I mean, Kemon Spell right now, according to the industry, 7th overall in the nation, number 1 running back prospect, number 1 in the state of Pennsylvania, of course, go figure, right? We already mentioned that. But this is a top 10 overall player in the country. This is the number 1 running back in the class of 2027. No doubts about it. He shut down his recruitment. 2027 prospect, and he's not taking any more visits. That is all the more impressive by Stan Drayton, who hasn't been at Penn State for a very long time, to instantly build that relationship, build that connection with both Mickens and Spell, and to fend off Notre Dame, reputable institution, right? That's Notre Dame. It wasn't just your everyday Big Ten school, Maryland, right? Wasn't trying to flip them. It was Notre Dame, and J1 Sider had a previous connection who had recruited them and got them to Penn State. So Stan Drayton's able to do that in a short amount of time. That is why this was such a huge weekend for Penn State football recruiting. Massive wins. Everyone seems to be on the same page here. You help yourself out at wide receiver. The future couldn't be brighter with Khalil Taylor in the fold now. And Penn State starting to reignite that conversation of running back you despite J1 Sider leaving and going over to Notre Dame. But it's more than just that. The class of 2026 is in a solid standing. What is the potential there? 2027, could that be a top 5 class? Could that be one of the best recruiting classes in the nation when you have a top 10 player right out of the gate and another potential 5-star to go with him? We'll discuss that and more on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus of the top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Do you need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free, that's right, free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it is your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's the letters SH and the number 5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Now let's talk about the class of 2026, then get to the class of 2027. Also talk about David Davis, somebody else who I guess, not as recent of a commit, but gets lost in the shuffle behind Khalil Taylor and the Kemon Spell and Messiah Mickens news. Class of 2026, currently as it stands, this is, according to On3, a top 10 class. They're number 8 in the country and have a total of 9 commitments. So Penn State's going to want to look towards getting over 20. I think that's a safe bet that they want to get at least 20 commitments in this class. Headlined by Kevin Brown, Harrisburg offensive lineman, definitely has the potential to be a 5-star. Mentioned Messiah Mickens, he would be the second best overall prospect in this class. Also, Troy Hune. Remember, Troy Hune is in this class as the California quarterback. Did regress a little bit in the recruiting rankings. Just his junior season didn't necessarily look the best according to the scouts. And Penn State is still, depending on how you want to read it, I think it's interesting. A Peyton Falzone, for example, Pennsylvania native, has drawn a lot of interest as a quarterback, but also maybe a tight end prospect. With the way that he continues to develop, and if there's uncertainty around Troy Hune, does Penn State consider taking 2 quarterbacks in this class of 2026 if they can get Peyton Falzone, if they can convince him to keep his options open or have a conversation with both Hune and Falzone and say, we're going to take 2 quarterbacks here. We'll see what ultimately happens. It's always important that you get at least 1 quarterback. 2 quarterbacks is certainly a plus. And then they add the likes of David Davis in addition to the news that Messiah Mickens is shutting down all of his official visits. He's fully locked into Penn State. I brought this up before. I want to bring it up again about the class of 2026. Jasir Rogers is the most intriguing prospect of this bunch. Now, certainly, I want to use this phrase correctly here because, of course, Kevin Brown is going to have the highest ceiling, maybe, or Messiah Mickens being those faces of this class. You have Troy Hune, the quarterback. Even though, like I said, he's regressed in the rankings, he's still one of these faces as a 4-star quarterback. But Jasir Rogers, I think it has to do with competition in the state of Delaware, that Penn State didn't take this commitment by accident. Okay, so this is what I've heard about Jasir Rogers, is that he's able to go toe-to-toe with some of the best prospects in the entire country. Penn State hosts, and other college football teams will host these camps, these 7-on-7 camps. It's one thing to do it against Delaware competition where you make them look silly. But when you go up against Ohio State commitments, when you go up against other perennial Division I commitments, and you test well, your numbers look great, your 40 time is exceptional. Jasir Rogers has all the athleticism, but it's the ability already to win those one-on-one matchups. His competition, I think that's where it's lacking in the recruiting rankings. But Penn State sees it in person. They see it at the training camps. They do their own internal scouting. So that's why Rogers is in this class. But some people might look at him and say, oh, well, he's a 3-star. He's not really rated that highly. We're going to go off of what I'm hearing on let's go off of what I'm hearing. The intel, the way that Penn State is scouting him, that he is more than just your 3-star recruit. A lot of that has to do with who he's playing against in Delaware, but against some of the best defensive back prospects in these training camps that your everyday scout doesn't get to see. he's winning those matchups there from what I've heard. They also have LeVar Keys in this class. He's another wide receiver prospect that, speedster, can stretch the field. So Penn State's wide receiver recruiting, which is why I mentioned, hey, the outlook is really good because you win in 2024, you win in 2025 in terms of what you were able to gather through those classes. Marcus Hagans, 3 solid prospects in 24, you get 4 in 2025, and then you add Jasir Rogers with a lot of potential, LeVar Keys as well. 2027 has Khalil Taylor. The wide receiver outlook couldn't be brighter. Despite all the circumstances, Marcus Hagans is still able to get some of these solid commitments from these prospects in these future classes, even though the recency bias says you don't want to go to Penn State if you're a wide receiver, but Marcus Hagans is still able to convince them otherwise here. Class of 2026, I like where it stands. Of course, there's always, you want to add some defensive tackles. You want to add some more offensive linemen. Everything's a work in progress. Again, they only have 9 commitments at this present moment. And by the time this episode's up, they probably will, maybe they add another. Now that you can get those spring visits, spring practice visits, players are going to be on campus. They'll certainly add to this 2025 class. More than 10 more prospects here. And if they do everything right with the players that they're targeting, they're certainly going to finish within the top 10. Now, they took some lumps. They lost some recruiting battles. There were guys that they really wanted to go after, and they ended up losing out to the likes of Clemson for 2 particular recruits. I still think the class of 2026 is in a good spot. This is something that needs to be mentioned a little more. This goes along with 26, 27. 26, because just recruiting in general, it seems like everybody is aligned here. James Franklin has talked about Pat Kraft and Neely Bendapudi, but now you have the NIL, you have Happy Valley United. That seems to be all on the same page here, and that's going to help. It's this day and age of college football. If you don't have a solid NIL program, you're going to be left behind, and Penn State seems to have figured that out, where they really started off pretty slow when NIL was first introduced in the transfer portal and everything else. Now it just only adds to the strength because Penn State's able to recruit as it is. James Franklin's always been an exceptional recruiter. Terry Smith, this current staff that they have. And now you have the NIL to go along with it. It's only going to make Penn State's recruiting even better. So I'm confident that they can finish with the top 10 class, even though it's still you're in the middle of the process with 2026. 2027, there's only so much we can analyze here because we're really going far out. It's already questioned, okay, is Khalil Taylor even going to stay in the class of 2027? Well, Kemon Spell already shut down his recruitment, and he's in this same class. Top running back in the nation, top 10 overall player. Khalil Taylor can certainly be a 5-star when these rankings are finalized. He is currently, according to the industry, 32nd overall. Currently at the number 4 wide receiver. So he's a top 5 wide receiver already as it is. So those are 2 potential 5-stars. And then Leighton Von Brandt out of the state of Delaware is a high-end 4-star. He's top 50 per the industry rankings. That's the combination of everybody on 3, 24/7, and rivals as well. And he's a top 5 offensive tackle. So Penn State has, conservatively speaking, 3 top 5 players at their respective positions, 3 top 50 players in the country already for the class of 2027. I've seen Penn State and James Franklin get off to some exceptional starts when it comes to recruiting for the future class. But to go and get 3 top 50 players immediate like this for the class of 2027, and you get one of them, the face of your team, the face of this class, who could arguably, he could finish as a top 10 player in the nation, to lock into Penn State and his visits, that speaks volumes. That is really saying something. So now I go back to what I said in the first segment. Kemon Spell, Khalil Taylor, Von Brandt, all these guys are going to do your heavy lifting. You take care of running, you take care of skilled position players in Spell at running back and Taylor as a wide receiver that, most other high school players are going to say, I want to be teammates with them. Von Brandt is your offensive lineman that you get, your anchor, the Kevin Brown of that class, right? And I know Javon Williams and Alex Birchmeyer haven't exactly panned out, but for the sake of recruiting, let's talk about the sake of recruiting, that conversation, you get those anchors on the offensive line. They will do a lot of heavy lifting. Someone like Landon Tangwall can speak to that too. So 2026 is in a good standing. 2027 is in a great standing. thus far. But they got to retain those commitments, of course. This one's really far out, which is why we can only analyze this so much. Players are going to go up. Players are also going to go down in these rankings. But to start, you get 3 top 50 prospects, 2 of them from the state of Pennsylvania, dominate the state. The best in Pennsylvania stay in Pennsylvania. Penn State's checking all the boxes, and that's what you want to see at the end of the day. The goals that they have set, they are checking them off one by one, and earlier so than they normally would there, and then some. Talk about David Davis as well. He's another recent commitment that hasn't gotten enough attention to this point. Solid prospect out of the Pittsburgh area, but he's a do-it-all player. Where does he end up? Where does he project? This is somebody that's a jack of all trades here, offensively and defensively. Let's project where he would play at Penn State. Coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building some wealth. You get surprising insights. When I actually started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much money was going to things like eating out, package deliveries, groceries. Now I can budget smarter and save more. And it's the all-in-one convenience of Monarch. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And you'll get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
About a week ago, David Davis commits to Penn State. 4-star athlete on 3 really does give him a little more credit than some of the other recruiting industries do. I think that has to do with injury. He was injured his junior season. But what I really like about David Davis is that he could play anywhere. Running back, wide receiver, cornerback, safety. It's also a special teams. When I say jack of all trades, I do truly mean jack of all trades. This guy can play any position. He can play it well. Where does he ultimately project? I mean, you give him the ball in space, he can take it to the house. That's the kind of ability he has on offense, but it's being able to read a quarterback. I actually really like the way that he's in coverage. Watching a bit of his film, I see him maybe projecting more as a safety just because he can sit back, read the quarterback. But if you need him to play man-to-man coverage, it's the size, it's his build, because he's listed at 5'11", 195 pounds. Because I would look at him and say, this is a slot cornerback. He projects similarly to a Daquan Hardy, if you will, or a Zion Tracy, and maybe he ends up there, but he could be a strong safety. He could be, right, the options are endless here. I do think he ends up on the defensive side of the football, but never say never. He could be another wide receiver in this class, but he's from the Pittsburgh area. He was primarily recruited by Terry Smith, who is, of course, the defensive backs coach for Penn State. So, given that, but it's part of it is the Pittsburgh area. Part of that, does that have to do with where his positional outlook is? Maybe. Penn State still has the Pittsburgh area pipeline. Pitt, West Virginia, everybody, the local schools just offer no resistance. They make it too easy for Penn State because David Davis is maybe somebody that, right, if the situation presented itself, stay local, but Penn State continues to not have to face any resistance from anybody over in that area where it makes sense. Hey, there's a lot of talent in Pittsburgh. Keep going back to it. David Davis continues that as well. He's, you got to overcome the injury. Again, that's why we'll look at this. Well, he's a low 3-star. How can it be that promising? Why would Penn State take a commitment from him? If you notice, Penn State's not afraid to take commitments from players that are injured in high school. Again, don't overreact to the recruiting rankings. You have to watch the film. You have to, Penn State sees things differently at these training camps. Again, they host these camps. The same thing that I talk about with Jasir Rogers. Well, he's a low 3-star. Okay, he doesn't play necessarily the best competition in Delaware, but when he goes up against comparable competition, he is winning those reps. You can probably say the same here for David Davis. They don't take these commitments by accident. I like his versatility. I like his size. He's only going to get bigger and stronger. He's going to get taller as well. And that's why I say, hey, maybe a strong safety projection, kind of like a Dejon Lane. If you're 6 foot, 210 pounds, it's Jalen Reed, right? Those are the immediate recent player comparisons here. And those are lofty expectations. Jalen Reed was very good. Dejon Lane is on the right track here, and I don't necessarily think it's fair to hold David Davis to those aspirations here. However, it's just he has a similar player profile, similar build, and just being able to do a lot of different things. That punt return ability, kick return ability. Now, Penn State typically does like to have running backs return kickoffs, so Davis would be your punt returner there. It's just his ability to do a lot. High football IQ, the ability, it's the instinctiveness as well. I like the way that Davis is just his reaction time, the way that he's able to read plays, see lanes, vision. Sometimes you can't really coach that. It's that instinctive nature. It's almost, you can't coach speed. You can't coach instinctiveness to an extent. And Davis has that. So solid pickups across the board. Of course, the news that is going to run the headlines thus far, potential 5-star committing with Khalil Taylor, Kemon Spell, potential 5-star running back, shutting down his recruitment and locking in fully to Penn State for the class of 2027. Class of 2026, Messiah Mickens re-ups his commitment, shuts down all of his official visits, and a face of the class of 2026 is now, which is more present, and then Davis getting into the fold. Most likely projecting as a defensive back, but hey, he's got an offensive skill set that I wouldn't blame him. I wouldn't blame Penn State if they ultimately put him at wide receiver when all is said and done. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A little bit of a recruiting update here, somewhat of a dead period. Again, those dead periods, Penn State recruiting does so much better when you can have the Lash Bash barbecue, when you can get players onto campus for spring football practices, you can get them in person into games. That's where Penn State really wins those recruiting battles, when they have the players, they have the recruits visit campus. So when you think Penn State, how they're ice cold, recruiting so bad, yes, that is true. Recruiting was down for a moment. They took some hits, but they've recovered and then some here. So thank you so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Really appreciate the support. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. And if you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast to stay up to date with everything Penn State sports here on Locked On Nittany Lions.